Hello, everyone. This is Tyler Vaughn with another episode of Between the Post. Today's episode number 6, will include a guest. Finally, we have a guest for you guys on the show. Though I know you are probably just having way too much fun listening to my voice, we thought, let's change things up and get some other people involved. The list has been long of guests who are interested in speaking and are passionate about the game of soccer and the position of goalkeeper. And for that, we could not be happier to provide a platform for great coaches, involved parents, phenomenal goalkeepers of past, present, and likely the future. So today's episode brings us Zach Duda. We'll introduce Zach in the beginning of this podcast and hear from him. And I tell you what, he brings such a unique perspective to the show today that I think that you're really going to be intrigued about. So the topic of the show, just to kind of get things rolling before we dive right in, is seeking perfection and its impact on identifying youth talent in modern soccer. Before we hand it over to myself and Zach and get things started, we ask you guys, please subscribe to us, follow us, like us, do all that other crazy stuff. I know it seems like such a small thing out there, and it will truly take just a few seconds of your time, but frankly, for us, it helps. If you're liking the content, obviously, if you have suggestions, reach out to us. We'd love to hear it. But if you're liking the content, you're liking what we're trying to do on Between the Post, your reviews and your thoughts of us and essentially just listening to what we have to say, it really, truly provides an opportunity and a channel and a pathway to get this podcast in the hands of others who might potentially be looking for the same educational, informational podcast that we provide here. It also will open up other opportunities for the show to hopefully bring in more experts, more of those really phenomenal speakers out there like Zach today, to get other people involved. I mean, that's what it's all about, right? Helping this generation and the next generation of soccer superstars and passionate soccer players, coaches, and parents, helping us evolve this beautiful game that we love so much. So if you could give us a few seconds, pause the podcast, give us a like, give us a follow, give us a whatever you want, a thumbs up, anything you can, anything and everything truly helps. And this is about the only time you'll hear us beg for your support, but frankly, it truly does make such a big, big difference. And that's enough for me, and we look forward to having your thoughts after the show. Any questions, again, make sure that you guys are reaching out to us. We would be so very happy to answer your questions and maybe get you involved if you're interested. You could shoot any questions, thoughts, suggestions even. We're good. We're not pros necessarily. We don't think that either, and we hope to provide you guys more of what you want. Just email any of that to tyler@renegade-gk.com, and you'll actually get an email right back from me probably within 24 hours. And again, we always love hearing from you guys out there, and by all means, feedback is a beautiful, beautiful thing. So enough from me. Let's jump right in to the episode 6 with Zach Duda. So today's podcast, we're gonna bring on a guest in the name of Zach Duda. So Zach and I have known each other for quite some time, and as soon as we started podcasting, I thought, this would be a great opportunity to bring on Zach's perspective and introduce him to all those listeners of Between the Post. So a little bit of background for Zach, and then we're gonna let him pretty much steal the show. So Zach has spent really about a decade at everything from the youth level to the highest levels. That's kind of right on track, Zach. I don't want to undersell you at all.
No, not at all.
Yeah. So, Zach has a brilliant background from the collegiate down to the youth levels, a variety of ages, developmental kind of places in terms of the soccer pathway from the youth level to the collegiate level. And also has a really great background in strength and conditioning. And I think that your perspective, Zach, is going to offer a lot of the listeners out there a really great glimpse into maybe some of the challenges I'm guessing that you and I have faced, and how we've either through other people, other resources, been able to kind of overcome and grow through that. So I'm going to shut up here in a second. We'll let Zach get going, but today's topic is something Zach and I kind of discussed, and I think it's something that's pretty relevant. That's probably a struggle for a lot of you guys out there, which is seeking perfection from a player standpoint and also from a coach standpoint and that mentality, but seeking perfection and its impact on identifying youth talent in modern soccer. So, Zach, before we dive in, let me give you a chance to kind of introduce yourself. I might have butchered it a little bit, but I want to make sure that everybody can kind of hear a little bit of your background before we get going.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I started coaching right at the age of 18. Had some unfortunate events happen my freshman year at college that impeded me to play, and I had a club coach that said, "Hey, I think you'd be good at this," and sure enough, I think he was right. And because I turned a career out of it, and after my career with youth, I decided to start my own business as a individual trainer in small group training, which still very much goes on today. And even after that, it landed me my first college job as an assistant coach at Milligan College. I'll tell you, it was a fantastic experience for me. Learned a lot, not just from the coaching side, but just the structure of, honestly, finding players and understanding what talent is and realizing that there's not a small pool of players out there. You got to really look at all players, size, speed. Never count out the underdog. Find that diamond in the rough, and which kind of brought into our conversation today. In all honesty, trying to figure out, what mistakes coaches make finding players, because I had to realize that early on. One of the greatest competitions I think I've ever been in is actually trying to persuade a player to come play for me.
Yeah, that's such
I think that's one of the biggest challenges I never thought I would have to deal with, but it surely was.
That's an incredible perspective, actually, and that is something you and I really haven't touched on, and I love that perspective you bring, because it's definitely outside of my comfort zone from the collegiate level and recruiting players. And I think that there are a few that really understand the challenges that you and other college coaches go through. And from a parent's perspective, I was talking to somebody the other day about the challenges parents and players nowadays are going through from just the recruiting process. But that isn't it's not something necessarily that I've thought about. And I guess it's the art or the science or the war, one or the other, right, behind recruiting players for sure. But yeah, that perspective is so very unique, and I think led us to this topic. And we were talking about seeking perfection and identifying talent, because I was telling and hoping that you would have identified me by now, but apparently that's just not. I guess that's not in my future. But that's okay. That's okay. But no, we're pumped to have you, and I know that anyone out there listening, as we get through this and dive into these topics, what our goal today is to introduce. We dove in together, and we wanted to make sure that we weren't completely off base here, right? And we talked to a lot of other coaches, and through our experience, obviously, led us to the fact that this is something we think people are facing, and it's something we wanted to address. And that's what we do on Between the Post is. We always try to address, educate, and inform people out there, coaches, parents, players, whoever you might be. And we take a goalkeeper focus a lot of the times, but as those of you that have listened to past podcast episodes, our goal might be directly to discuss and talk about the position of goalkeeper. But also, we want to really ensure that we're covering the game of soccer, because at the end of the day, that's frankly, there's 10 more that play the game with their feet than the one of us that play the game with our hands. So, we wanted to kind of dive into this, and Zach, if you're good, we'll just start out. And I wanted to give some kind of basic background on the real people out there that are the professionals that do studies on all this good stuff versus you and I that unfortunately, I think if we maybe combined intelligence against some of these doctors out there. But no, I wanted to give a little bit of background and then let you kind of dive into the coach aspect, the player aspect, and then our goal will be to finish up with 5 tips for parents. And we don't want to forget the parents out there and a lot of the struggles. And frankly, a lot of the coaches, you are also parents of soccer players, and that's kind of something we wanted to tackle. So that sounds like a good plan, Zach, and we'll get this thing rolling.
Yeah, that sounds perfect.
Cool. So in kind of addressing this topic again, seeking perfection and its impact on identifying youth talent in modern soccer. And man, that is a long title now that I think about it. But I think it's relevant, and so this whole idea of perfection, and as you and I were tossing around the topic and kind of reflecting on our soccer careers and our coaching careers, and I think that our background in working with youth, we both, and correct me if I'm wrong, I know you've seen over the years this increased emphasis on perfection. Now, I'm guessing that's because every single player, and all of us coaches as well, but all of us have access to so much more than we did 10 or 20 years ago. And what we see on TV, what players have at their fingertips in the form of a controller playing FIFA every single day, it doesn't always translate out to the pitch, and it doesn't always translate to reality. I was looking a little bit into some stats and some studies that have been done, and I came across this one. And this is the most high level you're ever going to hear me speak on this particular podcast. I can guarantee you that. But it was an analysis basically of children today, and it was a study that was done of I guess children since 1989 to 2016. And I'm assuming that if I was able to find one to 2018, surely it's only increased, would be my guess. But it basically stated in this particular paper that 2 out of every 5 children today were considered to display perfectionist tendencies. And perfectionist tendencies obviously is essentially what it is, and it's when a player or a child puts more emphasis on having high standards that they almost create unrealistic standards. And I think that we're not going to dive into the child side of this as much as looking at kind of the sports aspect. But I think that that's critical, and it's probably they bleed over. And I saw this really, really great article that a journalist named Amanda Ruggeri wrote. She said that perfectionism, after all, is an ultimately self-defeating way to move through the world. It is built on an excruciating irony. Making and admitting mistakes is a necessary part of growing and learning to be human. And it also makes you better at your career and relationships in life in general. By avoiding mistakes at any cost, a perfectionist can make it harder to reach their own lofty goals. And I don't know about you, Zach, but I mean, when I thought about this and we were kind of doing some background conversations on it, and I started to dive into it, I thought, we're tackling soccer, but frankly, this has got to be facing every single child that's in a competitive environment and in any sport in reality, and probably across the nation and across the globe in a lot of households as well. I mean, does that kind of align with your thoughts on it as well?
Yeah, this thought of perfection, and I guess this is kind of how I'll lead off with it. I'll ask you a question, actually. Describe what the perfect player is for me.
Yeah, I mean, so I think that I think that has to be the player we see on TV, right? I guess we have to assume that professional athlete, that Messi, that Ronaldo, De Gea, I guess if we're talking goalkeepers, but I guess you got to assume that's them, right?
Well, you are right, but here's the funny thing. How different is Messi and Ronaldo? I mean, you're talking about Ronaldo, who is 6'2", compared to Messi, who is 5'7". You're talking about somebody who weighs, Ronaldo probably somewhere between, 180 and 190, and Messi probably weighs somewhere probably between, I'll give him maybe 160.
Yeah, 160 in the rain.
I mean, you're talking about 2 completely different type of athletes. I firmly believe they play differently.
Yeah.
I don't think one mimics the other by any means. But yet they can both put away goals, and they are both still in the league, still playing, not retiring. They've been around forever, I feel like, and they're still looked upon as some of the greatest players. So and here's the trouble, is that especially as a college recruiter, or even as a high school trainer or a youth soccer coach, we want to mimic our players to be those players. It's not just the kids that are watching those games and watching these teams play. It's also these coaches. And we realistically believe that for our youth team to to dominate, they need to play like Man City. And that's just, a little ridiculous to think. And so what we start to do, we start to bottle these characteristics and these attributes of players into a bottle. And then we say, all right, so this is the secret formula to become Messi. Now I need to pour this formula over all these players so they can all become Messi.
I guess it's important is it important to add that you and I spent a week before this podcast trying to figure that formula out so we could bottle it and sell it to people?
No, well, you know what? If I could do that, was done years ago.
Yeah, exactly right. That's the $1 million idea.
It really is. So, again, we're looking at youth players who, one, our minds are still developing and still learning this game, especially in the States. All right? This is not a sport that we grow up with, and I know that's a different conversation for another day. But we take these, professional athletes, all right, and we say, this is perfection, this is what I need them to do. Instead of what I believe we should be doing is recognizing, what that one player is good at. Mm-hmm. I don't need him to be, 6'2", looking like a model and have a touch like an angel or anything like that. I need them to be able to do maybe, or me as a coach, to identify the one or two things they do very well and give them the approval of that and explain to them how that is so effective in a game. Because now what we're going to do is build confidence for this player, right? And the moment we can build confidence for this player, he's going to look like that superstar. And I think with that understanding, he's become so much more of a player than, him trying to be, this Messi or this Ronaldo. We, as a coach, we need to recognize, some of the subtle things players do, and not always look for that bicycle kick in the top of the 18.
Yeah, I love that, man. I love that. No, I think you're hitting the nail on the head. I mean, think about how many between the two of us, even and everyone else out there, how many soccer sidelines you stood on, and whether you were coaching or not, or just observing during tryouts, during games, whatever it might be. It essentially we're overcomplicating the reality, and the reality should be, I guess, what we could or should be telling players. I'm kind of hearing is play to your strengths, right? Improve your weaknesses, but play to your strengths, right? Play within yourself.
But what the worst part about that is, though, at a youth level, players do not recognize what their strengths are.
That's a very good point.
It's not Messi. They don't have the left foot of Messi. They don't have they can't pull a scissors like Ronaldo, and so they fail to recognize what they're good at. And it takes a coach to honestly having to point those things out or identify them. As a college coach, I need to identify those things in players. And how they would be successful for us.
How did you talk since that's kind of, I think that leads us into something that you can really enlighten everyone on, and myself included, is what's that look like from a college? We've got these college coaches, recruiters that are going out and, sitting on the sidelines, and I guess you have to know to a certain extent what you want, but I think what you and I had talked about is what you want might not be what you find. Is that so? Help walk me through kind of that from the collegiate side. That could be a brilliant perspective that helps us all understand the next level.
Yeah, absolutely. So as a college recruiter, of course we want 11 Messis on the field, even in goal. Yeah. I mean, Messi could use his feet in goal and probably still be a magnificent keeper. But the reality is that you are competing against, a ton of colleges. I mean, it's not just your UNC Chapel Hills and your UCLA Bruins or anything like that.
Right.
There are more colleges out there and more college coaches than, and the parent or even the player realizes. And so every coach is trying to find, those players. And obviously, from my experience, I would come in with a plan. First things first, recognize, positionally, what do I need? And so if I understand that I need a certain position, doesn't mean I'm not going to look at every player because, even at a club level or a high school level, in my opinion, they might not be playing the position I think they could play. And so then it turns into, again, recognizing the small things they're good at and being able to place them in the right part of the field for them to be successful, to make our team successful. So again, especially where I came from, I've come from a small college, and immediately I already know I'm not going to go after the player that already thinks they're a top 10 D1 school player.
Right.
I'm honestly not, because I'm going to probably waste my time. But what I am going to go after are the ones that are, I can tell and feel are just working hard, that just want to play the game, right? And the ones that are not getting the first looks. Because if they're not getting the first looks, it's because they're not just showing that, complete wow factor, I guess, as some would say. So my job as a recruiter is to find those wow factors in little things.
It's a great diamond in the rough mentality, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I love the thought of being an underdog. Growing up, I always felt like I was an underdog. I always have to prove something, which is why I'm so competitive, even in my day-to-day job now. I think even my coworkers probably find it a little annoying, in all honesty. But finding that underdog, because what I recognized early on, there are a whole lot more fish in this sea.
Right.
Is the best way to put it. So these programs that are labeling, these players as, these are top 100 players. I'm like, you haven't seen every player.
Right.
How can I really? This is a true list.
Yeah.
Somebody's gonna fall under the radar.
Right. And how does number 99 and number 101 differ? Right. In reality,
exactly.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, exactly my point. And so when you're going in looking for identifying talent, and you really have to make your own perception of what the perfect player is.
Right.
And you mentioned standards earlier. All right. Too high of the standards become unrealistic, and that's even for coaches. I was with the coach probably last fall, early fall. I was at a showcase, and him and I got to talking. We're friendly. Most coaches can't talk to one another because we always think we're better than the next person.
That's right. I lost that a while ago. I just figured out whatever. It's fine.
Yeah, that's basically how I got it. But he was friendly and everything, and he was talking about a player he really liked. I'm like, yeah, she's a really good player, and he's trying to feel like trying to find out if I'm gonna go after her or something like that.
Oh, was he sizing you up?
Yeah. He's trying to figure out what I'm gonna do, what I'm gonna offer.
Yeah.
And I flat out told him, I'm like, she's a great player, great talent, great athlete, but you know what? She's not the perfect player for me.
Right.
And he gave me a sideways look. He's like, who cannot want that on their team?
Yeah. So I wonder. No, go ahead.
It comes from several things. As a coach, you got to be able to read body language. So at the moment, just the attitude she kind of had in it, I think would fit with, our culture.
Right.
As a big thing. That was number one for me. It was kind of a sign off, and then to plug her into our system of play and how we've been playing, because we're doing great. They're on the rise, and to try and plug her in to make her the dominant player she needs to be, it would change the whole team, which I felt like would break down all of everything we've been working on. It wouldn't really improve us. It would take us a whole nother year to learn something for it to be successful. So it wasn't worth changing something for one player.
So do you think, this is kind of, I'm just wondering to gain your perspective, do you think that as coaches, clubs, organizations, whatever it might be, U.S. soccer, I don't want to kick a hornet's nest there, but I mean, do you think that as coaches we have foregone the idea or the practice of developing the complete player, and instead now unfortunately begun to develop whether it's what the ideal of the perfect player is, but maybe positionally a player, right? Where they're at 10 years old, they're a right back, right? And at 18, they're a right back. And you hit on something earlier that really resonated with me is just because you've been doing it for years on one team at one club in one little bubble, one way, doesn't mean that that's the right place for you or the right position. I think you had mentioned to it. So, I mean, do you think that we've unfortunately lost focus of developing that complete player that I know years ago that was the goal, right? Use your right, use your left, be comfortable to be slotted in anywhere. I mean, do you think that we've kind of gone away from that?
Absolutely, I think we have. Even as coaches, we get caught in, what's hot currently.
Right.
I mean, think about it. Remember when Jurgen first came in and he introduced the 4-3-3? Guess what? Every club team was playing after that.
Yeah.
And it just blows my.
It's
before 4-3-3.
Brutal honesty, but yeah.
And so now, and again, it goes coach after coach, and they try and grab what's currently working at a professional level, not paying attention to the perfect players they already have on the team because they think they're not perfect. Using what you have and understanding each player, finding, giving them the approval they need to feel as if they're the perfect player. A lot of it, I think is now breaking down to just having a relationship with these players. I feel like we're graduating a lot of older coaches who were kind of taught one way, like it's my way or the highway type of thing. I go on with the attitude, I'm like, you can do it your way, but the moment you mess up, you better try it my way.
Right. So, I mean...
Because you know what? I'm going to admit, I can be wrong sometimes. There's no doubt about it. And they may show me something that I didn't see before.
Right.
So I have to take all that in perspective and reevaluate the player every time I see him on practice field, the game pitch, anything like that.
Right. So it's the humility. So I think that we as coaches have to have that humility. And I've said it many times. This isn't to say that I'm some phenomenal coach, but I know I've said it many times to players just to right on your point. That is, we as coaches we're still learning about the game. The game evolves every single day, right? And for those of us that are in it, in the thick of it, it's almost hard to see the perspective, right? Because you're in it, it's just moving so fast, and you're constantly doing the same thing until the new thing comes around. Then it's the new thing. And I think we have to make sure as coaches that we're communicating the fact that, listen, that we're all in this together. I have the experience. That doesn't mean that it's the right way. Together we might learn a new way, and that's absolutely fine. But it also sounds to me that, I guess we broach this topic from the coach-player perspective, and I think that it sounds like we agree that as coaches, when we have a team of 15 players, we ourselves might have these unrealistic expectations. We might instill. It's not to, and we want to clarify this. It's not that. You and I both, I know for a fact that we are coaches and have been coaches and will continue to be coaches that push players to achieve their very best, their optimal level, wherever that might be at the end of every single day, season, whatever. So I want to make that very clear, but I think that we also have to be realistic as coaches in making sure that the expectations we set with players are achievable expectations so that we push, and when we achieve, we move the bar, right? So it's this constant philosophy of set the bar, achieve, move the bar a bit higher. Achieve, move it a bit higher. And it's we need to allow players, and you and I were tossing this around and kind of chuckling about it, but I think we really need to allow players an opportunity to have some success, right? These might be small accomplishments, right?
Yes, because here's the thing. You talk about raising that bar. If you do not raise that bar, they become complacent.
Right.
And honestly, a little arrogant, because then that's when they started thinking like, oh, you know what, I belong on the DA program now.
Right.
Whatever it may be. So that's a brilliant point, and I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No. That's perfect. No, man, that's good. That's what it's all about. I mean, I think that I'm guilty of it. I know for sure, and I'd have to imagine half the other people, if we're all being honest and looking in the mirror, probably everyone, what do we do as coaches, right, at the beginning of the season? We're all energetic. We're at the parents' meeting. We have our first meeting with our team, new team, returning team, whatever it might be. What's the first thing we think? All right, we're going to take the title, whatever title that might be, whether it's state cup, whether it's the high school championship, college, whatever it might be. That's it, the pinnacle. But I think we tend to forget what are the steps along the way, because we go from not kicking a soccer ball as a unit to the end goal must be X, winning the championship. Well, we forget everything that happens in between, right? It's like a needle spiking as we're tracking sound across a sound wave. It's, all those spikes, that's the progress. And I think as coaches, we tend to forget all the little pieces, the moments that build to that. It's not bad to have that long-term goal. It's only bad, I think, and I guess I'm going to go out on a limb and have that be my position. I think it's bad if we don't allow players to have intermediate goals along the way to gauge the success and the growth. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely, and I completely agree with that point.
So so you kind of touched on it, but what impact do you think this is having? So we look at, the World Cup's right around the corner. I've said this on a couple other episodes, and I try not to talk about it too much, but obviously we won't be watching the U.S. in the World Cup, and again, I think that's a whole season's worth of episodes, probably. But what impact do you think this is having? This didn't just occur yesterday, right? This isn't something that has been going on for the last season, the last year, the last 2 years even. I think that this has become so interwoven in the fabric of what we're dealing with in modern soccer in the U.S. I'm sure it occurs in Europe and other big leagues and big countries around the world. But, as we reflect, which I think this is probably what the next few weeks and a month and a half or so are going to give us, is an opportunity to reflect as we watch the world produce hopefully what will be some of the best soccer we've seen in quite some time. But, what impact do you think this might be having, whether from a coach, player, any perspective, on the development of soccer players in the U.S.?
Yeah, so here's a funny thought, and it kind of rolls in what we're talking about that perfect player. Because you realize, these U.S. national team players were all through this U.S. youth system in some sort of fashion, I'm sure, right?
Mm-hmm.
And from when they were young and to what we face now as a nation, we're just seeking perfection. Because you know what? U.S. soccer is always behind. At least, that's how everybody says it. And so they're always fighting for approval. They're always fighting for this perfection. And the new coach that comes in has a new set of expectations and perfection. We don't ever bring, and I hate to use this word, bring down our standards. It's not really that.
Right.
It's more so making it realistic again. How can we use the players we have? Because you know what? I don't care what people say. U.S. players, there are some great ones out there.
Right. Yeah.
How are we missing out of the millions of people that are on this nation that we're missing a good player?
And all we've got to pick is 11, right?
Say that again?
I said all we've got to pick is 11, right, out of those millions of players?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. I know that sounds easier.
Right, of course.
Obviously, because if it was that easy, we would have done this years ago.
Right.
Again, so it's those players that are looking for perfection. It's those new coaches that are coming in and saying, this is what I need you to be. The funny thing is, the coach should be saying, this is what you are, this is what we're going to work towards, and this is how we're going to become what we are expected to become, or what our nation expects us to become.
Yeah, it's almost like, what it's like the country in general, and from the U.S. side, it's almost like for quite some time, we as a culture, a soccer culture in the U.S., have looked out into the world to the Brazils of the past, to the Frances, the Italys. For those of you England fans, sorry, I'm not going to include it. I know we've lost some listeners now, but no. In all seriousness, we've had these teams, right? These Brazils, these standards of excellence, and I think that we have had the expectation all along that again, and it's probably a fair argument, right? Out of the millions of people that kick a soccer ball in this country, why can't we find enough to produce it's more than what we've seen, right? And I mean, that's not a knock on U.S. soccer necessarily. That's not what we're doing, but I mean, I think that we may have uncovered something that everyone's afraid to admit, which is our expectations, and you hit on it, our expectations as a country from a soccer standpoint for quite some time have been unrealistic, and they just have not been looking on the approach, the growth, and the program. And I think, I mean, how many other podcasts, news are, I mean, how many thousands and thousands of articles already are existing out there that we've identified the problem but not corrected it, and I think that you're hitting on some of the key points there. And we knew tackling this, you and I, we threw it around, we knew tackling this topic was just bled into so many other critical areas, so we don't want to get off topic. I know, but I mean, surely that's occurring, right? I mean, we as a country have expectations that it's setting that end goal. It's that mentality as a everyday youth coach that at the end of the season, success will be if we hoist the trophy, failure will be if we don't. But we're not creating checkpoints along the way, and I think that has to be. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Is that not what we're doing in the U.S. as a soccer culture?
Yeah, I think one of the things you mentioned on was about this whole idea of this expectation. We've been talking about this. It brought to a thought of mine. At a youth level, do you think we're putting labels on kids too soon?
Yeah,
I guess as far as what level they can play. Because I'll tell you from my experience, I've seen, these second, third team youth players go play at a Division II or a Division I school, and I've seen top D8 players not go and play college soccer at all.
Right.
Or go somewhere really small where they were expected to go somewhere really big.
Yeah, so
go ahead.
No, I was going to say, to that point, yes. Do I think that the thing with the labels, I mean, it's a can of worms in and of itself, right? But I think my thought on the labels is this: it's not as much the labels, it's what we're doing with them, right? It's creating some type of division between age groups, teams, males, females, big clubs, small clubs. I think that unfortunately it's creating a division there. And as a society, which is going to piss a lot of people off probably, but I think as a society it's that label of you made the DA team. Well, it's almost like we're telling a 10-year-old, or let's just make it, a 14-year-old, he or she has now reached the pinnacle. And I think that we're starting to lose the effort, the energy, the enthusiasm, the work rate, all those, buzzwords. I think that once we tag the player with whatever label it is, I think you start to lose that. And I think that unfortunately labeling players that, the younger we label them, the more pressure that adds. And I mean, again, that's going into a completely different topic, but you bring up such a brilliant point that's so relevant. I see it going on all the time where you have phenomenal players, phenomenal talents, females, males at the young levels, and you watch them progress. And for those of us that have spent quite some time, especially at the youth level, watching players throughout the progression, throughout the years, from 10 to 18, think back to how many players that we identified as 10-year-olds, hey, he, they're the next one, right? And every single year we're saying the same thing, right? And we're telling her, boom, we have these expectations where it's like, oh man, you gave up that pass. That was so critical, so simple, or you should have tucked that away. That was an easy one. We needed it. And then it kind of is like this snowball, right? And I think back to all the players that, I'm being completely honest, and tell me if I'm off here, but I feel like looking back even now and thinking to those players that you thought were going to be something spectacular, I don't know, but you're talking hundreds of players that I've worked with over the years, if not, God, probably thousands, which is depressing. But, let's just say maybe there were 10 that really, I thought were pretty special.
I mean, I don't know that if I could rattle off maybe two of them that continued with that label and that pressure, that continued to play at the next level. I mean, honestly. So, I mean,
Yeah, no, it's very true.
yeah.
One of the things we're talking about here, honestly, it does go with all of this about this perfection of a player, identifying a perfect player, because we're already talking about coaches are identifying a perfect player at 10 years old.
That probably doesn't know how to put their socks and shin guards on right.
Right, yeah. Maybe you can do some of the simple things. Can't tie your shoes. Who knows?
Yeah.
But again, it's us coaches saying this is a perfect player. And earlier when I mentioned labels, this is what seems to happen. The moment we label a top player, somehow that top player for the next 8 years stays at a top level unless they remove themselves.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, rarely do you ever see a coach who gets to stick with their team change their team the following year.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what I mean by we're labeling this wrong, because there is not a fair fight to identifying what good players or who good players are.
So does it remove competition? I'm kind of stoking the fire here. I mean, so does it remove the competition? Because you're right. You saying that you stick a player at a young age at the top level. I know for a fact, and I guarantee you, 99% of everyone that's listening to this, all three people. No, but I mean seriously, anyone listening to this has been around the game for quite some time. I mean, think about it, right? Just think back. All those top teams, every single year of tryouts.
Yep.
Yeah, what players move down? I mean, let's get real here.
The only time a top player is ever removed from a team if they decide to leave themselves.
Yeah. That's crazy.
On the other side.
Yeah, I haven't thought about it that way. That's absolutely crazy. I was talking to a buddy of mine the other day. He was going through tryouts, and ironically, we were kind of talking about the same thing. And I think that they're I'll leave the club out and his name out, but I think that the club is actually getting it right for the most part. It's what you dive into is the fact that, are you willing as a club and as coaches to now take the standpoint of, yeah, I'm sorry, but the best players will make this team and remain on the team, and that's why we have different tiers of teams, is because we want to create and to continue to have that competitive nature, because ultimately at the end of the day, it's not only just going to make better players for the club and for the team and for us, it's also going to teach kids competition as it relates to going into life, right? Let's face it, most of these kids are going to they're not going to be pro players, they're not going to be collegiate players, but they're going to be human beings that have to operate in a world of constant competition, right?
Absolutely. And here's the biggest thing. If your top team is the same top team from last year to this year, you as a club, I would say you are not doing your job developing the players underneath. Because it should be so competitive that you should have, I would say at least a quarter of the team be different.
Right.
I mean, if there's any parent out there that does not accept that, then they do not buy into your standards or your culture.
Right.
And honestly, they can go find elsewhere and be happy and essentially be happy elsewhere, because if you're not willing to let your kids compete, then we have a bigger issue for another topic another day. I know.
No. I mean, I think you're hitting on such a critical aspect that I think is plaguing. It's a bigger aspect, but I think it's plaguing kids. And I have a background. You and I talked about this. I have a background many years ago in teaching and education, and I've seen it from so many different angles. And I mean, you just have to. We've got to take kind of a look in the mirror at times, and I think you're absolutely correct. Is not all. Well, my buddy and I again last week were kind of joking, but we were joking about, unfortunately, something that was very serious. Is that he's basically having to break the news to some of his players that were on that top team that got bumped off by some of the players on the B team or the team below. And that giving that kind of honest feedback, unfortunately, and especially in the results of a tryout and the expectations of, hey, I know you were just on a team for a year with your buddies, but at this club the mindset is growth, development, and competition every day, each day, because if you're not getting better, you're getting worse, because there's no such thing as staying the same. And I think that in reality, he and I were chuckling about it because he had a list as a DOC, a mile long of parents he was basically calling to break the bad news, and likely not have a fun conversation. But again, I mentioned, I think their club is doing it the right way. They're looking at this approach to competition in the sense that, they're constantly giving players the opportunity to either progress up or digress down in the sense of their position, and allowing that fluid movement between teams at these levels to be an ongoing opportunity, I guess, which I think is brilliant.
I absolutely agree with that. I think, and trust me, after this talk, I want to know that club because they sound like they're doing it right.
Well, yeah, that's right. I throw them in and endorse me. Maybe they'll give me a they'll throw me a few. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I mean, I think that's rare though, right? I mean, in all reality, I think that everybody's got this pipe dream, and everyone knows. And working at we talked about this, and you're at a little bit of a larger club than I am, and I'm kind of going more to a grassroots organization, more on the developmental side, which is great because it's a night and day different perspective, and it's the opportunity to really grow where I am currently. It's growing the culture versus having an identified culture that has been in existence for 10 years and then trying to change that's very tough, right? But having a raw... having a raw, and I mean, it's an interesting experience for me, but having this raw kind of... Parents are okay. Maybe change isn't great, but parents are kind of okay. They're flexible, and you're really having an impact. But I think that this gives me an opportunity and gives us, the coaching core at that particular club, an opportunity to see, or to push the bounds, right? Because I think that there's a few less barriers there to some extent when you're trying to rebuild a specific culture for whatever reason. And I think that's such a unique challenge that coaches are facing nowadays, parents and players alike, is to make sure that we're always checking ourselves. I think is the challenge, I guess, that probably is going on out there.
Yeah, and again, I think this is first of all, if you're going to a tryout and you're not having to really try out for anything, are we just settling what we think perfection is now at that point? So now it's kind of the reverse of it. We start with these high standards of perfection for an individual player, but yet we go to a tryout and it's the same team from last year, and now that's like, oh yeah, that's what perfect means to us.
Yeah. Well, this will lead it. No, go ahead. I was gonna say, but go ahead.
No, do it. Be good.
No, I was going to say this kind of leads us into the parent thing. No, I mean, like the parent thing, you're exactly right, I know you've probably faced it, but think about all the parents when you provide their player an opportunity. You've got Team A and Team B, let's just say. Their player made Team A, but they knew that they were number 12, 13, 14, 15, whatever it might be on Team A. They're not going to get a lot of time, or they're going to get time at the club level because it's built into kind of the quote-unquote contract. Players are going to play at least 50%, which is not bad, don't get me wrong, but depending on the level, certain players, the top team, varsity versus JV, I guess, the whatever it might be, right? That 11 through 1, they're getting a lot of the minutes on the field, and those other players. I've had so many conversations with parents, whether at the end of tryouts or during the season, and you're talking about, hey, listen, so-and-so, your son or your daughter, yeah, they're a great player, but I've got a lot of great players on this team. And unfortunately, the fact of the matter is they're going to get more game experience on Team B versus, Team A. And that's not a bad thing. But think about, I mean, I don't know, I might be out there on an island by myself, but I mean, I don't know one experience where I've had that conversation with a parent and they have just flat looked at me and said, absolutely not. Or even worse, well, maybe not worse, but even maybe it's better. They've given the kid the opportunity, to say their thoughts and what they think. And of course the kid's going to say, absolutely no chance. I'd rather ride the pine on team A, just to say I'm on it versus get all the opportunity to experience and play on team B. Is that kind of something from I know that's the parenting side, and that's unfortunately rubbing on parents a little bit. So I don't mean it to come across that way, but I think that ties into what we're talking about, right?
Yep. I think there's two mentalities here. Those players that are seeking perfection think, I'll sit and ride the bench on the A team because I believe I'm going to, receive better training. There's a better culture on that team, maybe a more competitive mentality, instead of maybe, playing every game, starting every game for a lower team.
Yeah.
And because they'll challenge. Now, you also get the one who thinks, no, I want to be on Team A because of the title, essentially. I want to know that I'm on Team A, but we know being on Team B, that player is going to be a much more developed player by the end of the season than he would have ever been on Team A, because he's going to get, sadly, forgotten probably
right.
at some point.
Well, you bring up a really great topic, and I was talking to another coach about 3 or 4 weeks ago now, kind of. They were in the middle of their season, and he coached a girls team, and essentially the scenario was very, very similar to what we're kind of talking about, which is you got a player that, in reality, in terms of game experience, they should be playing on the B team. They made the A team. She should be playing on the B team because she's going to get more minutes on the field, and that experience is going to be great. It's going to build confidence. It's going to allow her to, really what's the word I'm looking for? But more of the experience side of things, and just expose her to different scenarios that being, maybe nowhere near the level she needs to be on the A team out there on the field when she does get minutes, So I think that I was talking to this coach, and he was telling me that he was having a conversation with the parent, and the parent was just up in arms about the fact that, Susie, let's say, Susie just was getting barely, they were at a club where I think they had that percentage where, it's like 50% or whatnot. And he was one of the parents that, we've all been there, done that. So again, it's all good. We're being honest here. We're not being mean. But, I think he tracked somehow. And it's higher than my pay grade and my level of knowledge. But he was tracking and breaking down minutes played and percentage against other players. And I'm talking statistician level stuff. And basically approached this coach that I was talking to, and he was kind of giving me the rundown and said, Susie's only played 48% of the games. What's going on? And the coach not only said, well, first of all, okay, fine. But, he took a perspective that I thought was fantastic. And I thought it was so high level, so appropriate that I wanted to kind of bring it in and share it. But he took the perspective that, with the parent that basically said, hey, listen, you've got to understand that the percentage of time that any one player is playing in the game at the A level does not pale in comparison, or it pales in comparison rather, to the percentage of time we are training, and your, in this case, daughter or son, your son and daughter, you're getting 100% of that. And I think that we have to figure out as parents, and I can't speak as a parent, I don't have kids, that was thanks to my years of teaching and coaching constantly. There was plenty of them around me, but no, in all seriousness, I think we have to take a look at that and remember that, listen, at the club level, we might be paying a ton of money, and it is a ton of money, don't get me wrong, but we're not just paying for that 50% of time in that game. And it's critical. I get it. I'm not arguing the fact that all players who pay and it's kind of the pay to play mentality, and I get it. It's fine. But we have to understand that you're not just paying for that, right? And as parents, we have to help kids understand that as well, because, kids a lot of times at the younger ages, I've found, and I think you found too, that look, kids are looking at adults to find their cues. And if dad's ticked off, who knows how that's going to impact the kid? And the kid's then not going to have that realistic approach that says, hey, listen, yeah, I might have only got 48% of the playing time, or let's hope kids aren't thinking about that, but maybe I didn't get a whole lot of minutes in last weekend's game. All right, but not instead of dwelling on that fact, why can't I focus on all the minutes that I'm getting and all the opportunities I'm getting to improve during the week, right? And, well, let's say maybe I didn't cut it last week and my minutes were down, and, what am I going to do? And I think parents have to start encouraging kids, and a lot of them are doing it. I mean, we're not dogging parents here, but I think as a core in a group, parents have to start saying, well, hey, listen, yeah, I get it, that's frustrating, but what can we do this week to make sure you earn those minutes and to show coach, what you're, that you're, listen, you're not happy, but you're willing to work for it, right? And I thought this coach, when he told me that, he explained that situation to me, I was like, man, this is absolutely brilliant. I mean, it's brilliant, because think about all the hours kids are spending in a game versus all the hours they're spending one-on-one with a coach or whatever it might be, training, right? That's where the growth should happen. And I think that we focus so much on that trophy mentality versus the steps that it takes to reach it,
Yeah, I think parents should almost, well, not just parents, I think anybody really should start evaluating the value of of the club should be from the training.
Right.
Look at the as a byproduct.
Right.
That games are earned, practices are deserved.
Yeah, I love
and
that.
I think that should kind of be looked at in this scenario. Yeah, I think that's fantastic. Brilliant, like you said.
Yeah, and to be honest, Zach, it is good to clarify that you can speak from the parent's perspective because you are about to have a baby, correct?
I am, in July.
Yeah, that's good. So there you go. See, that's why I brought you on, is because I can't get on parents if I don't have someone here who's is expecting or has a child.
Well, here's the thing about being a parent. I've been telling myself I promise I will not coach my own kid.
Yeah.
But that I know that probably will not happen.
Yeah. As soon as you find yourself on a sideline the first season, not coaching your own child, and then you mention, oh yeah, well I used to, blah blah blah. All of a sudden, guess whose phone's gonna start ringing?
Yeah.
So,
I know.
Well, so
Favors the
yeah, that's right. The less they know, the better. Well, in kind of towards wrapping up, we wanted to give 5 tips for parents. So, we always on Between the Posts, whatever topic we're tackling here or idea we're discussing, we want to try to break it down from the coach, the player, the parent perspective as best we can. So we kind of came up with these 5 tips for parents and bite-sized chunks here. We're not going to dive deep into them, but I wanted to give parents that are listening, whether you're a coach or not, but ultimately you probably have a player in some sport, wanted to give you something to walk away with to feel like you can implement it. And obviously for coaches, we hope that you've gotten something positive out of this, and players alike, if there are any players at any levels listening. But for coaches, we'll recap on that, but I wanted to give the parents kind of the 5 key takeaways, tips that we kind of thought through as we were discussing this topic. And the first one is, communicate honestly and openly with your child during what are unemotional times. And Zach and I were kind of covering off on this. I think a lot of the tendency as coaches, but as parents especially, is that when the emotions are high, that's when we tend to, here I am talking like I know what I'm doing, but, I guess I'm pulling from my experience with kids. Think about when the emotions are high, right? That's probably not the right time to say, hey, so-and-so, maybe you should have not done that, but you should have done this, right? I mean, that's not the right time. So, we said address the symptoms, and the symptoms being address whatever the issue might be, right? But address it with he or she and try to define the problem and work through, from a positive sense, communicating clearly, whatever age your player might be. Obviously, we've got to tailor that to that age and that child, but try to have honest communication about what's going on at an unemotional time. So essentially a time that's disconnected from, just riding home in the car. I think that's a tough time, to discuss. And we always say as coaches, we say, hey, listen, if you're going to reach out, please always do, but reach out the day after the game so that emotions aren't high. And I think that we have to remember as parents that these players are going through the same thing at any age, right? They know, hey, I just made a huge mistake. My team lost because I, instead of tackling I stab, boom, they get around me, they slot away, we lost, right? And kids see this, they know these things. So try to tackle and work through problems at times that emotions aren't quite as high and as fresh. So number 2, help your child to turn the perfectionism, the thoughts of perfection into process-oriented thoughts. So instead of looking at the outcome of the season or the outcome of the game or the outcome of the evening, whatever it might be, try to frame that viewpoint into the process that it takes to achieve goal A, B, and C, right? And what should you be doing to improve the process? Now, from a standpoint of soccer and from the standpoint of players, how can you improve your first touch? How can we break that down? How can we look to, instead of expecting that you should do it perfect every time, what are the steps that it's going to, you need to take, whether that's practicing in the backyard, or practicing or this, that, or the other, to achieve that. And if players think that they're doing things the right way on this particular point, how else could you have done it, right? If you thought your way was right, but maybe I disagree with you, do we think there are any other ways we could go about this? So I think it's bringing them in, but making sure that our kids are not thinking about perfection and having thoughts of that, but instead thinking about the process that it takes to achieve and develop. The third one, praise and encourage kids based on effort, not outcomes. And then this was woven into basically everything Zach and I were kind of touching on. But, if we only celebrate the wins or praise the positive outcomes, I think we begin to think that's really the only thing that matters. And I think kids start to only think that trophies and medals and W's are the only things that matter, as opposed to learning from defeat and learning from challenges. I think as a coach and as a player, Zach and I, we both agreed that some of the best experiences and the best lessons learned were not from success, but instead were learned from defeat. So number 4, use celebrities. This was a funny one. So use celebrities from their sport, and I'll give you guys an example, but use celebrities from their sport as examples to give your child a different perspective. Now, don't use celebrities that give them the wrong perspective. So be very selective, right? A good example I saw out there when I was kind of thinking through this is, if you think about that quote that Michael Jordan has, and he openly talks about the thousands of game-winning shots that he was given and the thousands of game-winning shots that he missed. I think that's kind of a good opportunity to really take a step back and look at all of the sports that are out there that have, and obviously make it applicable to your child's sport. But, we have examples of exceptional athletes that have failed, but learned from it and recovered from it and continued on. And I think that's what we're trying to hit at there when you talk about, using sports icons and celebrities, I guess, to give a different perspective. So number 5, be a model of excellence seeking your athletes. And this one is a great one for coaches too. Be willing to make your own mistakes. Zach and I, we talked about this and being humble as a coach and really allowing the players that you have to understand that, listen, I do feel like I know a lot and I'm in a position to help guide you through this season, but inevitably you're going to teach me something and I'm hopefully going to teach you something, but we're going to learn together, right? And I think that we have to be willing to admit that we made a mistake and then, laugh it off, so that from a parent's perspective that, these kids are seeing that, listen, we're human too, and humans make mistakes at the end of the day. And I think kids learn from that. And Zach, correct me if I'm wrong, but we kind of touched on the fact that, kids learn so much more from watching adults than all of us, whether we care to admit it or not. But I think that we tend to remember.
Yeah, absolutely they do. Absolutely.
So, kind of in closing, Zach, you wanna run through just kind of the basics on the coaches and kind of what we touched on with seeking perfection and talking about perfection, and now everyone's only going to remember that we said the word perfection, but in reality, so just touch base on it, if you don't mind, some of the kind of the key points, the key takeaways. If I'm a coach listening, but the key takeaways as a coach that I can take back to my team this season, next season, or this week, and make changes or make improvements.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway I would want any coach to run with right now is understand that there's perfection in each child. It's just in a different way.
Yeah.
That goes from the youth level to high school, getting ready to be recruited. We got to understand that if we don't start finding those perfections in kids, not only do they stop developing, but they also lose this passion that they may ultimately have. And as a coach, I don't think any of us want to kill that for a child. And I have in no place to ever tell a child that he will never be on the U.S. national team. And so the only way I would ever say something, or not me, but the only way I think any coach would ever say something like that is if they didn't find them perfect in their eyes. And it's because I think we fail to find the good things about them and their talents and their little perfections. So always find the small things that may make big differences in the game.
Yeah, and I think that is absolutely brilliant and phenomenal. That is, each player, there is no one-size-fits-all, right? Each and every single player, they have their own unique, attributes. They have their strengths, and they also have their weaknesses. And I think that we have to remember that we're working with children here at the end of the day, and we're working with players and human beings. And we joked about this, and I'm leading up to it, but I guess the most critical thing, and I think one of the most amazing things that we talked about, and maybe we included in many different forums, which is we're dealing with players. We're dealing with kids and people, and we can't overlook the fact that every single person is an individual and does things a bit different, right? And they are perfect in their own ways, and I think you hit the nail on the head there. And so we'll leave it with what is Mia Hamm's quote, right? It says, I think she said something to the effect of, "I'm building a fire, and every day I train, I add more fuel, and at just the right moment, I light the match." And I think that that's what we have to remember. It's the stoking of the fire, the adding the logs at the end of the day. That's what development is all about. And we can't just go from wood to flame, right? There's a process. So we hope that today's episode, and I am grateful to have Zach on, and I thank you, Zach, and everyone else thanks you. Yeah, everyone else thanks you because they are sick of listening to me talk by myself, and frankly, I'm starting to get a little bit crazy as well. But this is such a relevant topic, and I'm grateful to have you on and your perspective. It's so unique and so brilliant. And I'm looking forward to hopefully getting you on for a few more episodes down the road for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, I already have 10 more subjects I would love to talk about.
That's great. That's great. I love it. Well, we'll go ahead and shut it down for the day. And again, we hope that you have enjoyed our topic today on the Between the Post episode, being seeking perfection and the impacts it has on identifying youth talent in modern soccer. We hope you guys have enjoyed it, and we'll look forward to talking with you next time.